Could you say your name, pronunciation, and then your occupation?
You got it. Is it on?
Yeah.
Okay.
Nice and discreet.
I'm Christine Braunberger, Braunberger. I'm a professor of English at Onondaga Community College, and I chair the Interdisciplinary Studies department there.
Interdisciplinary studies? Nice.
Yeah.
So, I guess I like to just know about your personal tattoo history.
Okay.
What kind of made you interested in getting a tattoo? What was your first one like? Kind of set the scene.
So I got my first tattoo in 92, and it was the same professor that turned me on to the idea of thinking about tattoo. It was the same class that somebody had a really awesome tattoo in. And that person became a friend of mine, and we eventually went and got our first tattoos together.
Oh.
And it was illegal in Massachusetts, so we actually had to drive to New York to get our tattoos. It was illegal in Massachusetts until 2000, I think.
I had no idea.
Yeah, because of hepatitis scares. Tattooing had become illegal in a lot of places. New York City until not too long ago too, until the 2000s.
Yeah.
So all the tattooing in New York City had been underground. And you can have a really lovely scene even when it's underground, and they do.
Exactly, because people are still artists.
Right, exactly. So this professor, this was at Boston College, and these sociology classes, he would talk about how Michel Foucault, the French philosopher, talked about how we learn to be in our culture, and he just used the shorthand words tattoo. He said it's like the culture tattoos itself on you, and that's how you learn how to move through your culture, right?
Okay.
And I was like, okay, what about when people get literal tattoos? What the hell are they doing? and that was where the whole project started, was just that bubbling, taking what he used as a metaphor literally, and then going and getting a tattoo. And my first tattoo was an infinity symbol, and the whole idea was it's inside my skin, but it's also outside of my skin. I love the liminality of that. And then it just kind of, I don't know, I wouldn't say snowballed, but one way to get into a PhD program is to say, I know what I'm going to write my dissertation on. They get very excited. And so I could say, I want to write my dissertation on tattoo culture, and nobody had done that before, so.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Because it is a whole culture kind of around it and surrounding it, and it's developed into such a subculture that's
it's exploded since the 90s when I was writing, definitely.
Oh, I can't even imagine.
Yeah.
I can't even imagine, especially if at that point tattoos have been illegal. That's wild. So how many do you have in total?
So one way to think about it is 4. Another way to think about it is 45 hours.
Oh, okay. I never thought about it like that.
Yeah, because one of them was 5 6-hour sessions. No, is that right? 5 sessions, but I get, ranging from 4 to 6 hours.
Yeah.
So that's a lot of tattoos. And then one, this one that you can see today, this is one image, but it's 2 tattoo artists, 2 different,
I love that.
years apart. So this is from a fresco in on the island of Santorini in Greece. And there was this archaeological dig in the 70s that unearthed this culture that they were Minoan, they were amazing, and basically they were living on the edge of a volcano, and the volcano started to erupt, and they all got out, but their world was preserved. And so what the archaeologists found when they dug into it was this image all over walls. It was just like somebody's house. They lived like we did. And so this was an image. There were 13 birds, and then these lilies, which don't grow on the island anymore, but used to. And so it was the lilies, and then it was these different birds. And so this was done by Shanghai Kate, years ago. And then I went to California a couple years ago and had Pat Fish do this. But it's one tattoo, but it's 2 different people, right? So that's why it's hard for me to say how many tattoos.
Yeah, because
I've always got to make everything complicated.
No. I totally understand that. So it's your personal tattoos are personal identification. That's part of who you are.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know I was watching your TED Talk and you said a quote, I think, correct me if it's wrong, like, women aren't interested in punctuating symbolic gender roles. Yeah, so how do you think, like, the meaning of a tattoo changes on a woman than it does on a man? Like, just kind of like...
Well, I think
just in general.
For people looking from the outside in, they want to look at the tattoo and make it fit their notions of, oh, that's sexy. If it's back here, it's a tramp stamp.
Yeah.
Give me a break. People put them back there to hide them. You know, I've known people who've had tattoos back here and they were horrified to learn that it was called a tramp stamp.
Yeah.
And it's like, right, because that's not what you did to your body.
Yeah,
you didn't
because
just,
it's not...
right?
How you want to be defined as.
Right.
That's someone else putting that on you.
So I think very often when people are looking from the outside in, they want to use the tattoo to make you smaller because it's just kind of to stereotype, to make you understandable, knowable, and smaller than you are. When people often get tattoos to sort of celebrate their bigness in some way.
Did you find that was your reaction? Like when you first started getting tattoos, like was it kind of people trying to sum up your identity?
My tattoos remained hidden until I got my legs. So my body is heavily covered, but you can
really?
Kind of maybe a little peek.
Oh yeah, like on your shoulder blade.
Yeah.
And so it's like
it's all down. It's all in here. And,
and that was intentional because maybe of that knowledge of how you'd be judged.
Yeah, and because it's mine.
Yeah, exactly.
And then I got this while I was doing my dissertation research, and Lord knows what kind of job I was going to get afterward.
Right.
But we do know that often if you can say, oh, well, look, she's got tattoos, I don't know, she might be a little questionable, that could have been a way to get rid of me or not think about hiring me, so...
And so for tattoos in the workplace, like that's one thing that I've always wondered about, just because because the culture has expanded so much. Mm-hmm. But for people that do have like visible tattoos, it's kind of like, where are we in our like cultural progression? Is it the arms, the legs, the neck, like the face? Like, because of course tattoos have different meanings, you know what I mean?
Right. I find tattoos on the face and neck distracting.
Yeah.
And I want to look at you. I don't want to look at your ink all the time. Mm-hmm. So I love the Japanese horimono aesthetic that says keep it so that you can wear a shirt with a collar and not see anything. And of course that's because it was illegal in Japan, and so they were hiding their tattoos.
Right.
So that was a piece of that. But yeah, I don't like neck tattoos. I'm always like, Jesus Christ.
Yeah, and it definitely is like an indicator of different types of subcultures, like I don't know, whatever it might be, like just someone that's very heavily into that tattoo subculture, like maybe gang affiliation, like who knows, you know?
Sometimes gangs.
Sometimes, and sometimes a list of other things. So I always thought that was interesting. It's like, all right, where is kind of that line, you know?
I think the first neck tattoos were gangs, and definitely in the 90s when I would hang out in the tattoo parlors in Chicago, the people who were getting their necks tattooed were gangbangers.
Yeah.
You know. But then I guess I can't say about the expansion, although you definitely know somebody's saying something pretty complicated about themselves when they tattoo their neck.
Exactly, and their face, you know what I mean? That's a pretty serious commitment, you know?
Yeah.
Like, it's a pretty serious
And they're often saying there's some significant way in which I'm not going to fit into whatever larger culture is going on.
A kind of a rebel thing, like I want to stand out. And that's how I see it as, and it's always interesting to me because you always like wonder their stories. And, at least I do. I really think it's very interesting.
I used to just like when I was writing about it, I just grab people on the street. People were really wonderful, and I started to really appreciate the tribal affiliation that if somebody's tattooed, I feel like they're part of my tribe and I know something about them.
Oh yeah.
You know, and so I feel like to me to be around tattooed people is kind of comforting.
Oh, okay.
Because they're my peeps.
Yeah.
You know?
Relatability factor.
Exactly.
That's
Do you have any tattoos?
No, I don't.
Okay.
But I think that maybe my like lifelong curiosity, even since I was little, because like I grew up in an environment where there was a lot of just just like kind of a thing. I've always wondered about it, and I've always been so curious, like and kind of in awe, you know, like, oh, geez, that's such a cool thing to do. And why is it? Do you think that, I know that talking to people previously, they found that there is a difference in like that personal subculture because like it's a little bit more common. Do you see that, or like how?
Well, let's see. I'm definitely, I don't feel like I'm put into a box anymore, although my students, like, particularly if they meet me for the first time in January when we're all bundled up, and then May comes along and I'm wearing a dress like this, or they see the I've heard students say, oh, I never would have thought she was one of, and I'm like, what do you think you just learned?
Right.
You know, that I love art, that I embrace an aesthetic that means I can carry my art around with me.
Right.
What do you think you learned? Because what they think they learned is ridiculous often, you know. Or maybe it's right.
And what do they think? What do you think that comes from? Them saying, "Oh, I didn't think someone like you would have a tattoo." Like, what's the hidden, or the underlying meaning behind that?
I think that that it's not. If you're intellectual, you wouldn't do it. I think it's something like that, which intellectuals have bodies too. I really don't even understand how that fits, but I think it is sort of like. I was on Captiva Island, which is a very wealthy space, and I was walking with some family members. I don't know how we got talking to these people, but they said, oh, do you want to come see our villa? And, well, hells yeah. And it was, you know, one of these $4 million houses right on that ocean. I've never been in such a place before, so what fun. But he had looked at my leg and said, oh, youthful indiscretion. And I said, yeah, so...
That's a very bold statement.
Right? That was a youthful indiscretion, and I said, not at all. I write on the subject, and it was not an indiscretion, and there will be more. But in this wealthy, privileged space, these things just aren't done, darling. You know, and so it really is like people want to draw a class line, they want to draw an education line, both of which I think are bullshit. But I see people doing it.
But there is definitely, it's just because of like how it's been associated throughout the years.
Yeah.
Like if I think of a professional on Wall Street, you know, and if that's what my aspiration would to be, like the social norm is still like I don't want to get a sleeve of tattoos because I'm afraid. If I wanted to work in the music industry, maybe that's okay.
Right, exactly.
But it's like why, you know, how we
you sort of know, like the creative people can take it.
Exactly.
The intellectuals can't, so like the scientists, no. But that's not true.
Right, it's not.
but we have made these stereotypes are really easy ways to try to understand people, and so we use them, and
So
we
true.
use them wrong all the time.
That's so true.
So that's
And like, I find that what's like the origin of tattoos for real? Like the original origin. I'm sure there's a lot of different types.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So there isn't one origin story. We can look at several different. You know, from what we can glean from archaeology and anthropology, we can see several different beginnings. But probably it was getting soot from a fire into a wound and going, ooh, that's cool. But
Sounds painful.
one of the things, yeah, right.
I mean, tattoos are.
Yeah,
So.
but one of the more interesting archaeological discoveries was this mummy that they found in Italy. Oh, I think I talk about it in the TED Talk, this mummy. So he has 60 tattoos, and they correspond to, how do I say this? Where acupuncturists would go. So today an acupuncturist can look at where those tattoos are and go, oh, well, you know, and it makes sense to them, the placement.
How cool.
So there's obviously a lot of knowledge that has been lost.
Yeah.
But it kind of looks like they were maybe onto something back in the day even.
No, 100%. So like that evolving into such like, I see it as a westernized kind of like phenomenon.
Okay.
Like how do you think that came to be, and like why?
That was sailors.
Yeah.
It was sailors, totally sailors.
This classic sailor tattoo.
Yeah,
that's how
totally,
it became
that's
westernized.
that's how it came to us, and it came to us. This is very so the ancient history is hard to know.
Yeah.
The history of the last 500 years is easy to know. So in the last 500 years, we know that Captain James Cook met all these natives who were doing really cool tattoos, and when his sailors became interested in what they were doing, they had both Tahitian imagery tattooed on them, but then they'd also be like, oh, here, this is like a nautical star. This is an image from my world. Can you tattoo this on me?
Yeah.
And then they learned from the Tahitians. So it was from Tahiti. That's where it's all coming from, Tahiti initially. But that doesn't mean it wasn't happening in other places. It was. And so the more sailors traveled, the more they learned the different styles and like what they were doing in New Zealand and what they were doing in Borneo. There was one other thing and then being on a ship is boring. It's boring, and so
You need something to occupy yourself.
and so they would learn tattooing from the natives, and then they would tattoo each other, and so and then by the time the 19th century, 1800s, 19th century rolls around, we're calling them travel marks.
Yeah.
And if you're a traveler, you get tattoos. That's how you're marking your travels.
That makes sense. It does make sense. And it's like I'm trying to think of other cultures that have such a huge tattoo culture, and I just really can't think of one. I know I saw like a cool mini documentary on YouTube about like underground was it like North Korean culture, like tattoo culture?
Yeah.
But other than that, I'm just like not familiar with any that are so prominent than like the U.S. maybe.
But you are in a way, if you think about it, because if you know anything about, New Zealand is very far away. It's true, but the New Zealand Dayak culture has very specific kinds of tattoos for initiations. For you kill your first whatever, and this is what you get. American Indians had the same thing.
Yeah.
So when we look at drawings, when we first encountered Native Americans in the 1400s, they're covered with tattoos.
Yeah.
So we're not really hearkening to that background because that got lost and then found again. And then the Japanese, they're the Yakuza tradition, so those were definitely the gangsters. And then tattooing was illegal, so that's where they developed that horimono style where they tattooed the whole body but you couldn't see it with the clothes on. And then it was illegal in Japan for a long time. When they loosened the restriction, you could tattoo Gaijin but not Japanese. So you could tattoo the white people. White people visiting could get tattoos, but Japanese natives couldn't. I don't know. Isn't that wild?
That is wild.
So there are lots of specific island traditions, and I guess Japan is an island too. It's just a big island. And then we can look up into Northern Europe, and the Picts had their own kind of thing going on. They're a Northern European tribe, so there are lots of little spots that have their own traditions.
That's very interesting. Because I always wonder about the sectionality of like you talk about women, but it's like all right, like women around the world and women of different cultures. I wonder if that has any impact as to just like imagery and the way people are perceived. You know what I mean?
Well, definitely. Like one of the New Zealand things. When a woman reaches marrying age, she would get blue here on her face, and so that was that you read that as she's reached marrying age. Western men have gotten that tattoo, like 'cause they're idiots, and
The history is
and they don't know. Oh my God, the number of like Americans, we're lovely for borrowing the best of different cultures and right? But we often do it just really ham-handed and stupidly.
So do you see that as appropriation?
I see that as the American multicultural experience.
Interesting.
Is it appropriation? Yeah, sometimes. It kind of is what kind of attitude you bring to it, right?
I suppose.
And And where it's coming from, you know, like how, like
intentionality.
Yeah, like do you feel, is this because, you know, your grandfather was Japanese and you're feeling a connection, or is it because you're an idiot who doesn't know any better? Often we're idiots who don't know any better.
Right. I always wonder about that too. Like just looking, from like a kind of earlier like historical perspective, like because it can often happen, and I'm not in the deep, tattoo subculture, so I always wonder, like, is there a level kind of like history that you learn, kind of being more integrated into that world?
I think so. I think you definitely learn. Have you ever watched Ink Master on Spike TV?
I've seen like one episode of that.
Okay, so they've done 7 years of it, and the thing that, and like I remember meeting, so there are 3 judges, and I remember meeting one of them at a tattoo convention when I was first starting to write, and he scared the hell out of me. Oh my God, this guy was scary.
Why? Just demeanor?
Oh, yeah, he's still a scary guy on TV. He's
hilarious.
like, oh my God, he's so mean. And it's nothing, but you know. But anyway, so like old school tattoo artists like he is, and they definitely have a sense of American style. It's again, it's coming out of the islands, but it's coming more out of Hawaii and Japan. They can absolutely point to the people who brought it over, the people who made it popular, and what they call old school or new school styles. And so then the more you know about tattoo, the more you know. You've got old school and then new school, and then within new school you've got like trash polka, you've got these different kinds that are very, like trash polka is an Eastern European style. So like the more you know, the more there is to know. It's like music.
Definitely. Yeah. The more you know, the more there is to uncover. So like for someone, this is kind of like what I ask everybody I talk to, like for someone that is thinking about getting a tattoo, let's say my age, I'm 20, and is making that leap, that plunge into that world, like what kind of thoughts or advice would you give them in terms of like being prepared for like reactions, like maybe what was your reaction, the workforce, just the world in general? Does pain have some type of like initiation factor to it? Like,
I think pain is, well, we'll start there and then we'll go backward. Pain,
there's a lot of questions.
Matters a lot for a lot of people, and I think that some people who have there are certain kinds of mental illnesses that really lend themselves to tattooing. People who are inclined to cut themselves because
I never thought about that.
So I write about that in here somewhere. But people who are inclined to cut themselves can sometimes be the same kind of people who are drawn to tattoo because it gives you the same release. It's the same kind of pain.
In a productive way.
Yeah, but it's productive, and it's not going to leave a stupid scar, but it's maybe going to leave a stupid tattoo. Because God, there's like a lot of bad tattoos out there. But then to talk about advice, don't get a bad tattoo.
So what is a bad tattoo?
Right. So obviously we can think about that in terms of like what a tattoo artist would say. Are the lines clear and clean? Somebody who doesn't know a lot about tattooing doesn't even know how to look at a line. They don't know how to evaluate it and say it's a good tattoo.
Yeah.
So I've got a blown line. I haven't really looked at this to think about blown lines. And I probably
look great to me.
Those guys are too good. I'm not going to have blown lines, but like the more you know about tattooing, the more you're going to know about, like, oh, well, this is good or not.
Yeah.
But I think that if somebody is getting their first tattoo, they don't know a lot about it. They don't necessarily want to, know about blown lines and shit. Thinking long and hard about what your image is going to be. Flea from the Red Hot Chili Peppers had 5 years per tattoo. I love that. I think longer than that about my images because they're going to be with me forever. I don't take it lightly. I don't point to something on a wall and go, oh, give me that.
And you see that a lot of the
Tuesday.
time.
Yeah.
You do.
Yeah. And it's like, that's going to be your body forever.
Right.
But forever is a really hard concept to grasp.
100%. I 100% agree.
Right?
Especially if you're younger, which
Right?
a lot of the time people are.
But the beauty of tattoos is it really snaps time into your body in an interesting way because the tattoos you might not feel you're aging, but you can watch your tattoo age. Thanks, doll. And watching a tattoo age, or even watching, like, having a bad tattoo, you can still, that's still a story that says, I was young and foolish and I'm not anymore. That's often the story people tell themselves, right?
Yeah.
I used to be young and foolish. I'm not foolish anymore. Well, yeah, you probably are still, but you can tell yourself that. That's the kind of advice I'm inclined to give, is think long and hard about your imagery. Think also about where you're going to put it. I can sit here like this and look at my tattoo. I can do yoga and look at my tattoo. Back here, who gets to enjoy that? My favorite tattoo is right here. I can only see it in a mirror. That pisses me off.
I've always thought about that, like back tattoos, like
Yeah, dumb. Back tattoos are dumb. Because I can't enjoy it. So, like right now, as I was taking pictures yesterday for my next tattoo, and probably inspired me, but I've been thinking that I was going to do it this summer, and I'm trying to think where is it going to go so that I can enjoy it, and do I dare do my arms?
right. And
And I still haven't decided.
you said you want to keep your arms clean?
I don't know.
Maybe.
Yeah.
So much blank space. Well, I'm curious now. What is your favorite tattoo back there?
Okay, so this is a water scene. It's from here to here.
Wow.
And into here, and it's seashells and seaweed, and it's a water scene by somebody
wow.
who does water really brilliantly. She's super good at it.
That's amazing.
So yeah.
What made you want to?
Because I'm such a water baby. I said I moved here for the kayaking, right? I'm really drawn to doing stuff in water.
Yeah.
And spending time around water. And it's sort of where I'm most at home.
That's so nice to have.
So I
have
carry
that
it with
you.
me.
Yeah, exactly. Is there anything else you want to add, or
In tattooing or in the interview?
kind of both? I mean, I could stop it whenever.
Well,
but now I'm
the
just kinda
next image,
curious.
I love raspberries, and I always, when I move into a new house, I plant raspberries. It's like, I don't even unpack, I plant raspberries. And I love raspberries, and so I'm going to get raspberry plants. I'm gonna get a
Nice.
raspberry vine. But that's the next thing.
Do you know where yet? You're still deciding.
That's where I'm done. That's the one I'm deciding.
Because vines are interesting because it can kind of
Yeah.
go anywhere.
And I like loose tattoos that are legible from a distance. When you have to grab somebody and really get to figure out what's going on,
The imagery to that: grab somebody, pull them here,
Yeah.
get a microscope out.
that's not always.
Yeah.
I mean, I like tattoos that are worth looking at in detail, but yeah, I like a loose tattoo that you can read across the room.
Yeah.
Those are my favorite.
For the sake of this, I'm going to stop.
Okay.
But thank you so much for the interview. Thank you for sitting down with me.
You're so
really
welcome.
appreciate it.
You're so welcome.
That's just so I can